Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Wars Rebels Season 4. This video is part of a series of videos where I cover every episode of Star Wars Rebels one season at a time. In this video I will cover all the episodes of Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels. So, yes, this is probably, I would say, definitively my favorite season of the show. I did think it was really impactful. It felt a bit more like a Star Wars movie than the other seasons of Rebels did. Although I will say I was surprised that the majority of the season took place back on Lothal. I kind of thought we got away from Lothal in Season 1, but I suppose the point was to bring it back to its origins, the show's origins. But honestly, I liked the show better when it was tying our characters into a larger rebellion that was raging throughout the galaxy and not just so focused on one planet. That being said, I did just say that this was my favorite season because despite the fact that we spent most of the season on Lothal, it had a long, once we got to Lothal, which was in episode 5 of a 15 episode season, it sort of stayed there and had like a 10 episode arc, which I thought played out extremely well and much better than what the show had done previously. Although I still, if you saw my reviews for the previous 3 seasons, I still liked them as well. I was quite fond of season 2 and 3. But yeah, I personally gravitate more towards a long-term, continuous, or I guess you could call serialized storytelling, where it's there's more continuity and each episode flows into the other. And I thought this one, as a complete story, worked extremely well to build the characters, to build the tension, and to make the payoff that much more satisfying. So, let me go ahead and jump into the episodes of Season 4 of Rebels. Let's start with the first episode, Heroes of Mandalore, and I'll do parts 1 and 2 together. So, before we go back to Lothal, we have to wrap up the storyline on Mandalore, because that was sort of left hanging as a hanging sort of thing at the end of Season 3. Sabine had left to go to Mandalore to help her family try to win Mandalore back from the Empire, and here we see Ezra join her. And I believe Kanan and a few others were there as well, to try to take back Mandalore. And I love that how there's a running joke in these episodes about how Ezra sucks at using a jetpack. And then Chopper, of course, is just flying around. I love these 2 episodes. I thought they were really good. I've really gravitated towards the whole Mandalore storyline, particularly because I saw the Mandalorian the first 2 seasons before I even watched the Clone Wars and Rebels, and so going back and seeing the sort of backstory, the backdrop of Mandalore and the kind of people they are, and to see how different this era is compared to the Clone War era, and how Mandalore has been, ravaged by the Empire. And how Sabine's family, in previous seasons had abandoned her, but now they fully support her, and that she has to go rescue her father that was being held captive by the Empire and scheduled for execution since her family was rebelling, and how there's a weapon that Sabine made for the Empire in her brief stint with being with them, and it's coming back to haunt her because the weapon, fries Mandalorian armor specifically, so it goes after their biggest strength, and that is tied to their cultural heritage. But then, of course, Sabine manages to change the weapon so it goes after stormtrooper armor, but then ultimately, instead of using that, continuing to use that, its very existence is a threat to Mandalore, so she destroys it, and they're able to vanquish the Empire, and instead of taking power for herself, she gives it to Bo-Katan, who was previously the leader of Mandalore, and again, the character I was familiar with because she appeared in The Mandalorian, where apparently, even though this episode ends with, the Mandalorians gaining their independence and Bo-Katan being the leader, apparently sometime in between that and The Mandalorian, they'll lose Mandalore again to the Empire and pretty much and Bo-Katan will be vanquished, and Moff Gideon will take over and steal the Darksaber from her. And of course, this is probably still going to come into factor in season 3, how this is, of The Mandalorian, what's going to happen to Mandalore next. So that story's not finished yet. So it was interesting getting this chapter in it. So yes, I did really enjoy this two-parter. So next, we go into the name of the rebellion. I'm actually going to do these parts separate because I think each episode is pretty distinct, unlike the Heroes of Mandalore, which kind of told the same story over 2 episodes. So part 1 of In the Name of the Rebellion is when we dive more into the rift between Saul Guerrero, who has a more sort of radical, violent cell of the rebellion and doesn't get along very well with the rebellion leadership, particularly Mon Mothma, and how he's suggesting to destroy this satellite that the Empire is using to gather it's like a spy satellite they're using to gather their intelligence, which has been so effective that they've been able to defeat the rebellion at every turn. So it's something that needs to go, but the leadership of the rebellion, and Howard tends to agree, believe that destroying the satellite is pointless because they will just make another one, and that it's much better to sort of hack it and gather intelligence about the Empire, and so know what they're knowing so they can stay one step ahead of them. And so Ezra and Sabine are sent on the mission to the dish to sort of plant this device that will spy on them, the hacking device or whatever. But the mission goes wrong. They're discovered, and because the mission was so dependent on stealth, Ezra decides to blow up the dish anyway because they can't do their stealth thing because the Empire detected them. But Saul Guerrero just happens to show up anyway and destroys the dish himself, but takes Sabine and Ezra with him. So yeah, I enjoyed this. Was an enjoyable episode. I did like it a lot. Pretty suspenseful. I like the scenes with Chopper flying around the dish and changing it back and forth, and Sabine and Ezra trying to fight stormtroopers while the dish is constantly trying to toss them off. And I like the sort of implications of let's do the stealth mission, but it all goes wrong. So then we get into part 2 of In the Name of the Rebellion. This one I didn't like as much. This is when Sabine and Ezra are with Saul Guerrero, and they decide to go off on his mission to uncover this big Empire secret, which turns out to be like this giant, powerful crystal that is very unstable, and the Empire is trying to harness its energy so that it would be extremely dangerous if they succeed. And so at first they're totally on board with Saul Guerrero, but then during the course of the mission they realize why his way of doing things is actually not very good and he's very reckless and almost gets them killed, and destroys this crystal thing, which is a huge hazard. So then they end up being at odds with him, but he ends up getting away, and because he still needs to be in Rogue One. And so they part ways, and Howard picks them up, and it does kind of I told you so. This episode was okay, but as I said, it's not my favorite. So then we start the 10-episode arc on Lothal with the episode The Occupation, which is where Ezra completely wants to go back to Lothal, because that was the plan at the end of Season 3, but that plan got sidetracked when Thrawn discovered the location of the rebel base and attacked them. But he still wants to get back to it, but Mon Mothma is like, they're too depleted after being attacked, and they don't have the resources anymore to pull it off. But Ezra is basically like, well, I'm going there anyway because I need to help my people. And they said they can't guarantee that they would be able to extract him or help him in any way. He's like, I don't care. So our whole team goes there and tries to set off some explosions to hinder the Empire. It doesn't go very well, just as they predicted, because the Empire does have a really tight stranglehold over the planet. But then Clancy Brown, I can't even remember the character's name, but Clancy Brown shows up to rescue them and gets them out of the situation. But he's like, okay, so when's the rest of your rebellion getting here? And they're like, they're not getting here. And he's like, oh, so you're just gonna fail miserably. Okay then. So it was a very ominous way to start off this arc, and it really, showed the kind of stakes they were up against. So it was a decent episode. So next episode is Flight of the Defender. This is with these certain type of TIE fighters that are like really mean and hard to defeat, that are being built on Lothal. And so Sabine and Ezra go on a mission to try to hack it and gain more information, but Thrawn shows up in the middle of it and like discovers them, and they try to get away on the TIE fighter. It was really awesome seeing the scenes where Sabine was like shooting, going right at Thrawn with the TIE fighter, shooting him, and he just got out his blaster and was just shooting it. But apparently they had a backup plan. They had a kill switch in order, built-in failsafe to destroy this TIE fighter if it would fall into enemy hands, which it did. But first, Thrawn wants to test the ability of his fighters, so he sends his fighters out to try to destroy it. But of course, when that fails, he goes to his backup plan of just destroying it. And Sabine and Ezra crash in the desert, and then this is when we meet his Thrawn's big henchman of the season. This like creepy creature dude who can move very fast and crawl. Can't remember his name. Maybe I'll look it up. But anyway, so he goes after Sabine and Ezra and doesn't capture them, but he does manage to plant a tracking device on their speeder, which leads into the next episode. So the way that Ezra was able to get away from that creature guy was by following these Lothal cats. There was a white one in particular, and it led him to this Loth wolf, which was apparently thought to be extinct and kind of legend or whatever. And it's the wolf that led them back to the rebel base and allowed them to go back there. And of course, they will play a very important role in the season to come. So then we get into the next episode, Kindred. This is where I believe the creature's name is Roch, or whatever his name is. He tracks the rebels back to the base using his tracker, and of course brings a whole troop of stormtroopers with them, and they try to destroy the rebels at their own base. And now they look like they're completely screwed, and there's no way out of the situations until and they're cornered and they got nothing to do. But then that's when the wolves show up, and apparently Ezra gets the idea, uses his force abilities or whatever, which is apparently very animal friendly, his particular style of the force. And realizes that they need to follow the wolves, even though they're like scary as hell looking and they're growling and shit. But he thinks that they, in order to survive, they need to follow the wolves, and that's when they seem to take particular interest in Kanan, and they keep saying Doom, which we'll learn later is Kanan's name. So they obviously have some connection to him, and then once they see him, the wolves take them through this magical portal, and then Kanan will reveal later that the wolves are actually very, very force sensitive, more so than most other beings. And so they're able to use these mystical powers to travel through this portal that takes them to the other end of the planet, the southern hemisphere, far away from the Empire, and so it's a very safe place for them to hide. So this was a really interesting episode. I love the introduction of more sort of mystical side of things. The Loth Wolves, I think, are very interesting. I think is a very intriguing introduction and addition to the season that definitely adds a lot to it. So yes, I did enjoy this episode. So then we get into the next episode, Crawler Commanders. This episode was kind of just okay. Hera is back with the Rebellion headquarters, trying to convince them to go out to help them on Lothal, and her pleas again are not like met very kindly, and then she like goes in and passionately pleads her case and convinces them to send a squadron out to help. Meanwhile, on Lothal, they find this mining crawler, I guess they call it, this big, slow-moving device that's like destroying the land and everything out in the southern hemisphere, but near their base, and they decide to take it over. And this guy is like, "Arr!" It's got a squeaky voice, and it's like, "You're pirates!" And it was very annoying. But I mean, it was okay, I guess. They end up, taking over the crawler and using that as a base or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really like this one as much. So then the next episode is Rebel Assault. That is when Hera shows up with her squadron, and at first it looks like they're completely outnumbered as they're trying to run the blockade, and they managed to pull off some very good defeats, some victories in the face of such a superior force, and they break through and get through to Lothal when a giant fleet of TIE fighters is waiting for them, and basically just destroys them all. And that was pretty, again, it's really making it clear just how difficult of a situation it is, and just how impossible of a situation they're in. But a few of the X-Wings crash, or Y-Wings, whatever they are, I don't care. A few of them crash, and so there's a few survivors, but the Empire quickly sends in Ruck, who has this like smelling abilities to track everyone, and other stormtroopers to round up any survivors and lock them up and torture them. But Hera comes across another rebellion guy who survived, and them and Chopper try to get out of the situation, and they're being tracked, and eventually and the Ezra and his team realizes it's a impossible situation, so they decide to retreat. But Kanan doesn't. He stays behind and goes back to try to find Hera. And this is, I think, in the previous episodes, they're really hinting at this romance between Kanan and Hera, which I gotta be honest, I felt like kind of came out of nowhere. But whatever. Anyway. So Kanan is like apparently in love with her, so he goes back and tries to rescue her, but he doesn't get to her, and she gets surrounded by Rocked and the Empire. And the only way they can get away is Hera ends up giving herself up so that the other guy and Chopper can get away, and then Kanan is there waiting for them, Chopper and the other dude, and helps them get back to their base in the Southern Hemisphere. So, yeah, that was a pretty intense episode, gotta say. So, next episode is Jedi Knight. This is when Hera is being held by the Empire, and Thrawn is torturing her. That governor person just tortures her for the fuck of it, doesn't even ask her any questions, but then Thrawn shows up and asks questions, and that, of course, goes as well as you would think it would. They come up with Ezra and Kanan come up with a rescue plan. In fact, Kanan specifically goes to Ezra and is like, look, you gotta come up with a plan. I'm too close to this. I'm too emotionally involved, so you gotta come up with this plan. I'll just go along with it, whatever you say. And he comes up with this plan to use these gliders that they build, suspension of disbelief coming in, to pose as these bats that fly around the city anyway and go in and infiltrate the city that way. And that works, and they get in and rescue Hera, and Hera apparently was given this truce serum or whatever, which makes her act all drugged and everything when Kanan shows up, which makes for interesting interactions. Now, several things. So, it's obvious from the way that Kanan was behaving in this episode that he knew he was going to die, and the way he was saying farewell, like he knew he was going to die on this mission. I guess he had like a vision from the Force or whatever. And also there was previous scenes where he was with Hera and they were like, I think, yeah, they kissed, and they were talking about how, we're going to spend... It's not just this episode, it's previous episode too, where they're like, we're going to spend all this time together. We're going to live beautiful lives and everything will be perfect. I'm like, Kanan's going to die. Because when it's like obvious setup that whenever two characters like that, one of them is going to die. And sure enough, so I wasn't surprised at all, to say the least, when Kanan died. But I still thought it was an extremely powerful, extremely emotional scene. Like, it did bring a bit of a tear to my eye when he did. So they were gonna escape, but that governor lady, whoever she is, looks like so pissed off she was willing to destroy the fuel tanks in order to kill them, which, as we'll see, will have repercussions for her, because apparently Thrawn's not very happy about that, because destroying the fuel tanks cripples their production, which is exactly what the rebellion wanted. So, she killed Kanan for sure, but at the risk of causing more damage than the rebellion ever did to them. But so she does it, and they're stuck on top of this fuel tank. They're all about to die, and Kanan uses his Force abilities to hold the fire back, but he can't do it for long. And so Hera tries to stop him or rescue him, but he knows that if she does that, they'll all die. So he uses the Force to push them away so they can get away, and then he dies. Yes, so that was very effective. That was very emotionally powerful. I think maybe the obvious foreshadowing of his death, I don't think it actually took anything away from it. It actually did make it really, it was still really powerful when it came. I was a bit shocked that they were willing to kill the main character off like that. But again, we are getting close to the end of the show. So no, that was a really good episode. I really liked it. So then we get into the next episode, which is Doom, where I think Zeb and Sabine go off on some mission, and they end up fighting that rock guy who almost gets the better of them, while Ezra is like off chasing these wolves, and he gets surrounded by them, and one of the wolves like highly implies that he is Kanan, which I'm not sure if they ever said that definitively that this is Kanan reincarnated, or if this just like the spirit of Kanan is with this particular wolf. I'm not sure, but they basically tell him that he has to go on a mission to the Jedi Temple because the Empire is about to acquire some dangerous knowledge that would make them even more powerful, and that he needs to go there and stop them. And yeah, so that I felt like this was a good episode to deal with the aftermath of Kanan's death really well. And it wasn't doing it in a boring way. Like it was still an exciting episode and really intriguing, and sets up nicely for the next episode, which is Wolves and a Door. So this is when they do go to the Jedi Temple, and we find this creepy dude there who's up to something, trying to uncover some mystical secret of the Jedi Temple. And so they discovered this weird painting of those dudes we saw in that episode of Clone Wars that I didn't really like. And they find that there's some sort of like Sabine and Ezra like pose as stormtroopers and eventually are caught, but they find there's some sort of strange portal, like the drawings of the wolves come alive and they form this portal, and Ezra jumps through. It's like a Stargate sort of, and that's where the episode ends. So it was a good. So this again is mostly setup, but it was good setup. It was very intriguing, very much like the situation they're setting up here. So it gets into the next episode, which is a world between worlds, where Ezra is in this really bizarre mystical space that's kind of outside of normal space-time, and he's able to sort of manipulate things that happen. And he goes into this portal and sees Ahsoka fighting Darth Vader back from season 2, and is able to pull her out of that situation, pull her into this strange space. So then he goes to a different portal, and he sees the moment that, in fact, he seeks it out because he realizes if he saves Ahsoka, he can save Kanan. So he seeks out the portal where Kanan dies, and with the intention of saving him. But then Ahsoka talks him down, saying that if Kanan survives, then the rest of them will die, and they need to survive. And she tells him that Kanan made the decision to sacrifice himself to save his friends, and that he should respect that and honor that. And so it gets into this theme of him needing to learn to let things go, which I thought was actually very powerful, very nicely done, much better done than Lost, if I do say so. So here's the thing. I get the impression, because he's like, oh, if I save Ahsoka, I can save Kanan too. But here's the impression I get, is because at the end of season 2, when Darth Vader was fighting Ahsoka and they disappear, we don't know what happened. So we don't know that Darth Vader killed Ahsoka. So, yeah, we don't know that actually ever happened, that she actually ever died, whereas Kanan clearly did die. So what I'm getting at is that I think that this is time travel we're talking about, because he reached Ahsoka out from a different time period and pulled her into a different time period, and she exited and more of the present, because Ezra is much older, he's got shorter hair, and she even said, first thing she says when she sees him, like, oh my god, you look so different. So this is time travel we're talking about, and what I'm getting at is I believe that this is type 1 time travel. That is the whatever happened time travel logic, that you can't go in and change the past. So if you go to the past, you can't do anything different. Everything's going to play out the way it was. So what I'm saying is that Ahsoka never died. It's not like he went back in time and changed it so that she didn't die. I'm saying that him pulling her away from the timeline had always happened. That was always her fate. because they cut away before we see it, which is why it would be different than Kanan, because he did die. We saw him die, and that if he had saved Kanan, then he never would have died. That would have been his fate, was for Ezra to pull him away and save him, but of course that wasn't to be. So I think Ezra thinking he could go back and change the timeline was actually incorrect, because I think they're using more of a type 1 time travel thing, or at least that's my feel of it. But anyway, I felt this whole like weird space, like outside of the continuum, whatever, was really interesting. I love the character stories and how this was a huge growth for Ezra and the role that Ahsoka played in it as sort of a mentor figure was really, really nice. Now, then we also got the plot with Sabine was being held by that creepy librarian dude, or historian, or whatever you want to call him, or sorcerer, who was trying to unlock the secrets of the portal, and he was kind of trying to manipulate her into helping, and then, of course, threatening her as well. And then we found that it's because the Emperor was trying to gain access to the space, and that was the whole point of trying to learn the temple secrets, because he wanted access to this space outside of time, which of course would make him extremely powerful. And we see that he does gain some access to it, but not total access, as he tries to attack Ahsoka and Ezra while this in this space, and we get the impression that he wants to use them as a tether to pull himself in, and so they run away and jump off of portals, which of course pisses him off, because now he has no connection. And then once Ezra gets back, the Sabine and Zeb and all of them are in the middle fighting the Empire at the temple, and they're like, okay, let's get out of here. He's like, no, we got to close the portal. So they make sure that they close the portal for good, that's so the Emperor will never have access to it. I love this shit. It's weird and mystical. As I said, I thought it was a great character story, and it's very interesting, like mystical shit. So yeah, I love this episode as well. Really great episode. So then we get into the next episode, A Fool's Hope, which kind of just sets up for the finale. It shows a lot of the various characters we've seen throughout the show, like Sabine's old partner showing up, the Rex and his old gang from that, from that planet with the stupid, walker that they took over, and get Hondo, of course, I guess we have to. And Hera gets them all together, and they team up to go back to Lothal in order to help Ezra in this final battle and taking it over. Because another thing I forgot to mention, in the previous episode, Thrawn was just called away back to Coruscant. He's like, okay, well, I'm just gonna fuck off now, and leaving that incompetent governor behind, who ends up blowing the tanks. And as I said, Thrawn wasn't very happy about that, and he was off world when it happened. But he's like, when I get back, I'm gonna fucking kill you, basically. And so she's trying to capture the rebels before he gets back in order to, stop her death from happening. So, and meanwhile, they're trying to run the blockade, but this time they're using, instead of like fighting the way through, they're trying to use Hondo's pirate or smuggling, and he hates that word apparently. I'm not no smuggler, but they're trying to use his smuggling techniques to sneak onto Lothal. And meanwhile, Clancy Brown contacts the governor lady and is like, look, because they had this scene at the start of the episode where Clancy Brown's like, we're never going to win, it's not going to happen. And they're like, yeah, we can win, have faith or whatever. And he seems dubious, and then he contacts the governor. It's like, I know we're not going to win, so I'm just going to surrender now, and I'll give you this information and ask for leniency because I'm not going back to prison. And I think that this episode of the show was actually really trying to sell that, this is by having that scene where he's complaining that, he's about to betray them. But I knew this was a setup. I knew that. It's so obvious. I'm like, sure, he's going to betray them. No, I knew it was a trap to get the governor lady to go to the southern hemisphere so that they could capture her. And it seems like their plan almost failed. Like, it was dependent on Hera getting there right at the right moment, which is very lucky that she did, because what if Hondo's smuggling techniques didn't work or took a lot longer? And also, there's dependent, the other reason why they ended up winning is because the wolves showed up and started, like, kicking ass, and they had no idea that was going to happen, so it seems like this was a bad plan. It's just pure luck that it happens to work, but whatever, I guess you have to have faith in the Force, whatever bullshit they say. But anyway, yeah, so it was a good episode. It was a good setup. So then we get to the finale, the series finale, final episode of the entire show, family reunion and farewell, a hour-long episode, where they go to the capital city in Lothal and use the governor lady's codes or whatnot to try to trick everyone, try to get all the Imperial forces to return to the base so they could fly the base up into space and destroy it, thus getting rid of the Imperial presence on Lothal. But of course the plan doesn't go perfectly or smoothly, as the Thrawn gets back earlier than they expected and starts attacking them, and the Imperial forces that are in the base get wind of the fact that the rebellion is trying to take it over, and so they fight back. You had this final showdown with Rukt, who brings down the shields of the base so that Thrawn can start killing innocent civilians in Lothal's capital city as a way to manipulate Ezra into giving up, which Ezra does in fact give up and surrenders himself and is brought aboard Thrawn's ship. But Zeb and the others attack that rock guy and manage to finally kill him and get the shield back up, and that's when Ezra is trying to be manipulated by the Emperor, but he overcomes him. And meanwhile, that other pilot dude who was in the rebellion, he apparently was acting out with Rex, or was it Rex, or was one of Rex's friends? No, I think it was one of Rex's friends. But anyway, minor characters go off and bring the space whales, which apparently was Ezra's backup plan that no one knew about except for that one dude. I guess he was too minor for a character. It didn't matter if he knew. So they bring back the space whales, and they sort of destroy Thrawn's fleet quite easily, and then they kind of grab hold of the Star Destroyer Thrawn's on and go into hyperspace. And Hera's freaked out because they're telling Ezra to get the hell out of there, but he's like, no, I have to go with them. I have to see this through. So the whales hyperspace off into who knows where, and Ezra goes with them, and he gets this, very powerful, iconic, the Force will be with you always, before he leaves to who knows where. And so they're all saddened by this, of course, but then Sabine's like, hey, we have to finish what Ezra started, and so they were able to fly the Imperial base up into space and in the sky and then destroy it, and the governor lady dies with there, and all the Imperial forces are gone, so Lothal is free, and they're all celebrating and cheering, and hey, we won. And there's a final goodbye message from Ezra where he says his farewells to everyone, and Sabine says something like, I'm counting on you, and she has no idea for what. And so then we flash forward to many years in the future, apparently right after the events of Return of the Jedi, where the rebellion won. They defeated the Emperor, and apparently, we had this voiceover by Sabine, where apparently Zeb takes Kallus to his people to live on that planet, because Kallus apparently had thought that he wiped that species out. It seems weird that even though he didn't and he turned good, still seems weird that they would accept him and that he would go there to live. But whatever. And and that Hera was at the Battle of Endor, and that she has a son. Then I think they're heavily implying that's Kanan's son. Now, when these two had a chance to hook up, I'm not quite sure, but whatever. Again. So, and then, she says in her voiceover that the Empire never came back to the Thal because they got too preoccupied with the rebellion elsewhere and eventually fell. And so Lothal remained free the whole time. And you see this mural up there that's really nice that had all the main characters of Rebels when they all looked in their prime, like with some little cats and little wolves like painted in around them. So it was a really touching scene. But then Sabine said that she realized that what Ezra meant by that he was counting on her, that she still had work to do, that she needed to find Ezra, and that's when Ahsoka shows up, and it kind of ends there. So it's kind of on a cliffhanger, really. A kind of an unresolved situation where we don't know what the hell happened to Ezra. And Sabine and Ahsoka are apparently going to go off on a mission to find him. Now, I have been told that the Ahsoka series is something I didn't know before I watched Rebels. Is going to feature Sabine. She's going to be a character who's in the Ahsoka series, and apparently is going to be, a lot of people theorize anyway, that it's going to be about Ahsoka trying to find Ezra. Now, this would go along with her appearance in The Mandalorian because she said that she was looking for Admiral Thrawn. And Admiral Thrawn, of course, was with Ezra at the time they disappeared. So I didn't realize, I knew who Admiral Thrawn was, but I didn't realize the implications when I first saw The Mandalorian. But now, so maybe we will get a resolution to the storyline in the Ahsoka show. In live action, maybe. Don't know for sure, but that would be very interesting because it did seem like they left this one hanging a bit. Now, Admiral Thrawn, I know that he was in the books that used to be considered canon no longer when the extended lore, when Disney took over, but they decided to include this character in Rebels anyway, so bringing him into official canon. But if I recall, and I'm sure those huge Star Wars fans may be able to correct me if I'm wrong, but I recall that Thrawn was kind of in charge of trying to resurrect the Empire after the events of Return of the Jedi, and in Rebels he kind of disappears and goes off nowhere knows where. So when I saw The Mandalorian, she said I was looking for Grand Admiral Thrawn. I got the impression that he was up to trying to rebuild the Empire, and that's why she was looking for him. But maybe that still could be the case. Maybe for some reason he got away from Ezra and he's now trying to rebuild the Empire. And maybe that's the storyline that's going to be addressed in the Ahsoka show. Either way, I'm very, very much excited for this Ahsoka show, and it's always been the one, even before I watched Rebels, it's always been the upcoming Star Wars show that I'm most excited to see, and I'm including Obi-Wan in that. I wasn't that pumped for Obi-Wan, and as I said, Obi-Wan, it was interesting, but it wasn't really that necessary. Whereas this Ahsoka, this is what I've always been looking for more, even before I watched the cartoons, even before I had the background information on this character. It seemed like it would be a really good show. But, anywho, let me get into my favorite and least favorite episodes of Season 4 of Rebels. I'll start with my least favorite, and I'll start by saying there were no bad episodes this season, contrary to previous seasons where there are always one or two bad episodes. So I would say my least favorite episode of the series is Crawler Commanders. As I said, that one wasn't really that interesting to me, where the guy with a squeaky voice was going, "Oh, pirates taking over the ship." It seemed kind of a waste of time. So yeah, it wasn't a bad episode again, but it would be my least favorite of the season. Now, as for best episode of the season, this is a lot harder to come up with because there were a lot of good episodes this season. I really loved the two-parter to start the season, The Heroes of Mandalore. I think the Rebel Assault and where Hera tried to get to Lothal and Kindred, that introduced the Loth Wolves, and the part one of In the Name of the Rebellion, where they were on that satellite dish. Those were all interesting episodes as well. But I particularly loved Jedi Knight and Doom, the episodes that dealt with Kanan's death. They were quite powerful. And A World Between Worlds was also an extremely powerful episode of where he saved Ahsoka and dealt with the having to let go. But I will say my favorite episode of the season is going to have to be the finale, the series finale, Family Reunion and Farewell. I will say that's the best episode of the season. That was extremely powerful, a very satisfying payoff to the season. Alright, so before I give my rating out of 10 for Season 4, I want to introduce a special guest, my sister Alyssa from her YouTube channel, Alyssa Jean Reviews, that happened to be visiting me as I'm recording this. I thought we'd have a quick discussion over Season 4, what we thought of it overall. So Alyssa, thanks so much for joining.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Mark. I'm looking forward to hearing what you think of Season 4, because as of yet, I don't know.
Alright, so my rating for Season 4 out of 10 is going to be a 9. Excellent. I was a bit surprised that we spent the entire season again on Lothal. I was kind of done with Lothal, and I felt like I wanted to see more about the overall rebellion, but I was surprised at how well I liked that storyline, how effective it was, and how they basically did a 10-episode arc on it, which I think I loved, like the continuous storytelling arcs like that, and I think this one was done particularly well, like character building. Even though the romance between Kanan and Hera kind of came out of nowhere, I still thought it was effective and a very effective ending, and I was actually surprised that they killed Kanan, but I think the big sort of finale, probably my favorite episode of the entire show. I thought it was really effective and built off of what they have established. So, Alyssa, maybe some of your rating or some of your thoughts on Season 4 of River.
Yeah, it's hard to give a rating because it's been a year since I've watched the full season. I did catch the last couple episodes with Mark while I was out here on a rewatch. But I agree with a lot of what you said, and I agree that the romance between Kanan and Hera kind of comes out of nowhere, although I do think it was there subtly before. They just didn't emphasize it enough to be equal to how they emphasize it at the end there. But it works, and I'm not gonna lie. When I first saw the death scene, I was crying. I was a little teary-eyed. I thought it was very effective. And one thing that you didn't mention that really struck me about Rebels as a whole is the character development, specifically with Ezra, how he goes from this kind of little street rat, kind of a brat, and his ending at the end of the finale, where he is not necessarily sacrificing himself, but he is kind of making a sacrifice there for his friends, for the rebel cause. And I think it showed a lot of maturity, and I look at the character from where he started in Rebels and where he ends, and I think that was fantastic character development. So that was one of the things that really struck me about the finale. And I am one who, and Mark may not agree with this, but I am one who thinks Rebels is better than Clone Wars overall. And I know that tends to be a minority opinion, I think, amongst Star Wars fans. But a lot of that has to do with the character development. I think I think it's better in Rebels than it is in Clone Wars. So if I had to give a rating just off of memory, I'm probably in the area of 9.5 because I do give 0.5s. I might even give it a 10, but I would have to rewatch the whole season before I would give it a 10. So, but I do remember thinking very highly of season 4 in particular, and season 3 I also liked quite a lot. In my opinion, it got good in the finale of season 2, and was really good from there on out. Although some episodes in there were not amazing, but I loved the latter half of the Rebels series, and to me it is the best Star Wars series to date of any kind on television, whether animated or not. And I'm looking forward to that Ahsoka series, which hopefully might pick up some of these loose ends that were left at the end of Rebels.
Yeah, I was just talking about the Ahsoka series.
Yeah, I'm recording this not having heard anything that Mark said previously. I'm going to watch Mark's reviews a little later. But yeah, I am looking forward to that. And yeah, I really liked Rebels. I've been trying to get Mark to watch Rebels for a while, so I'm glad that you liked season 4 at least.
Yeah, it seems like we have a different opinion on season 3. I maybe didn't like season 3 as much because for me, I thought season 2 and 3 were kind of on par with each other. They were both like, but season 4 I think went above and beyond. I think season 4 was the clear like standout of the show.
Yeah. I definitely agree that season 4 was the best. I think with season 3, I could see where you're saying it is similar to season 2, but season 3 to me, because the best episodes I'm thinking of, like Sabine's arc, the best episodes of season 3 to me were better than most things in season 2. So that's why I kind of felt that season. I honestly feel about Rebels it gets better every season.
Yeah, I would agree.
Culminating with season 4 being a fantastic final season for a show, and I agree with you too about the kind of serialized arc that they have and in the final season. And I also agree that it wasn't my first choice for them to return to Lothal, but they made it really work.
Now, since you brought up Clone Wars, that was actually something I was going to bring up because I actually agree. I think Rebels is better than Clone Wars. And it's weird to hear that most people don't feel that way. I mostly feel that way because I feel like a majority of Clone Wars was, oh, here's a battle in the Clone Wars, oh, we gotta defeat the Separatists, and like, I don't care. Like, I know what happens at the end, and the battle ends up meaning nothing because it's all Palpatine manipulating both sides. So it's hard to me to get invested in individual battles. Now, I know towards the end of the series, they start to overcome that and play more with foreshadowing Order 66 and whatnot, but as this series as a whole, to me, had a lot of fluff and a lot of filler, and you have to go in, and particularly a lot of like terrible episodes. Whereas I think that's where Rebels excels, because there's none. Even though Rebels was less interesting in season 1 and 2, there was no like bad episodes, I think, and not like a string of like terrible episodes with Hondo playing with kids watching like a circus show going and stupid shit like that, so Rebels never got as bad as Clone Wars did,
or those stupid robots.
Those fucking robots.
And I think you and I might agree those are the worst episodes of Clone Wars. To me, that's the worst set of worst story arc of Clone Wars, was the whole robot thing. But yeah, see, the thing about Clone Wars is when it was good, it was really, really good. But you have to sit through a lot of crap and a lot of mediocrity.
Yes.
To get to the really, really good stuff. And I feel toward the ends of the run, particularly in season 6 and 7, there was more good stuff than there was in the previous seasons. But you definitely have to sit through a lot of mediocrity and bad episodes, whereas in Rebels there's some mediocrity that you have to sit through. But first of all, they're shorter seasons.
Yes. Particularly season 4.
Yeah. Except for the final 2 seasons of Clone Wars were a little shorter, but for the most part, they're shorter seasons. There's less you have to sit through, and it's more serialized in the traditional sense, not these like 3-parters, 4-parters.
Yeah.
Particularly that final season is more serialized. So, yeah, I was a little surprised too when I heard that this seems like the fandom more prefers Clone Wars over Rebels, which I don't agree with. I think Rebels is a better show.
Yeah, and it's funny because I have a friend at work who watched them both before me, and he was like he says that he's a Clone Wars fan at heart, like that's his favorite Star Wars thing. And I was saying, oh, I'm watching Rebels. It's like, oh, that badly animated show. I'm like, it's not that badly animated. Like, I still like it. But as far as like season 4 of Rebels being the best like season of any Star Wars show, I don't know. For me, it's a toss up between that and season 7 of Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Which I know season 7 of Clone Wars came out after this.
Yeah. Yeah, which says that they've gotten better at doing these shows a little more recently. Well, Mark, I can't wait to see what you think of The Bad Batch. I don't know if you're going to watch that.
I am good. That will be next month. I will watch season 1 of The Bad Batch.
And then you'll be all caught up and you can watch
season 2. Yeah, and then I'll go straight into season 2 when that airs. Yep, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, thanks a lot so much, Alyssa, for joining me for the final thoughts, and thanks everyone for watching. Be sure to check out my channel. As I said, next month I'll be covering The Bad Batch. In the meantime, I do lots of other reviews on other shows like Star Trek, Westworld, Better Call Saul, and more. So check out Alyssa Jean Reviews, and also be sure to subscribe to Enchantment of Eternity for more of that. And thanks a lot for watching.